What's up guys, Miles Deep back here again with a follow-up video to my previous video, which was about me being reported to the FAA. Some people had some questions about what I was originally reported to the FAA about, and that was flying beyond visual line of sight. Just to clear that up right off the bat before I get into the video, which is top 10 rules to know before you fly the Mavic Mini or any other drone for that matter. So you just got the Mavic Mini and it's great because you don't have to register it and therefore you don't have to follow any of the other rules, right? That is unfortunately very wrong. If you watch my previous videos, you'll find out. I know from experience now. Even though you don't have to register the drone, it's still subject to all other rules that all other drones are subject to. So that brings me to my first point. These aren't going to be in any particular order, but they're going to go from really obvious to things that you may or may not know about. Number 10. Maximum blood alcohol level to operate a drone is 0.04. So yeah, that's pretty strict. That's it's less than the legal limit to drive a car, which is 0.08. This rule is actually kind of a little bit weird because you can't drink alcohol 8 hours before operating a drone. So this rule kind of applies to if you go out and get really drunk and then 8 hours later you want to fly your drone, but you're still kind of drunk, so you still have a 0.04 alcohol level, you still can't fly. So hopefully that won't really apply to too many people. I don't think many people are getting wasted before flying drones, but it's good to keep in mind. Number 9, you have to register your drone if it's more than 249 grams, which we all love because we have the Mavic Mini, we don't have to register it. But if you add anything to the drone, you're gonna have to register it. So the 249 grams applies to everything, including the battery when you take off with the drone. So if you add a strobe to your Mavic Mini, it's gonna put it over the weight limit. Even if you add one of those little stickers or skins to your drone, that could put it over the 249 gram limit. A lot of those stickers will weigh 1 gram. So if you're at 250 grams, legally you have to register. Okay, number 8 is yielding the right of way. This should be pretty self-explanatory, but if you're flying and there's a manned aircraft, absolutely yield the right of way to it. They're pretty strict on that. Even if there's another unmanned aircraft, probably a good idea always just to yield the right of way, especially as a hobbyist pilot, which most of us are. But yeah, there's not really too much need to elaborate on that. Yield the right of way and you'll be golden. Now number 7 is daylight operation. Obviously you can't fly while it's dark. If you have a strobe on your drone, you can fly 30 minutes before sunset or 30 minutes after sunrise. And it has to be an FAA compliant strobe. They have certain rules for how far your strobe has to be able to be visible. It's 3 statute miles for the strobe visibility, and the FAA defines them as anti-collision lights. 3 statute miles for the anti-collision lights. Now, number 6 is operation from a moving vehicle. This is kind of a weird one. Probably not too many people will do this. You cannot fly a drone if you're in an aircraft. So that's just a straight up no. But if you're on a boat or in a car, you can fly your drone over a sparsely populated area. The definition of sparsely populated area is really vague. It's not properly defined, unfortunately. So you kind of have to use your best judgment for this. There's no actual official ruling for it, so it's kind of up to the FAA agent who would review your case if you were reported or they wanted to look into a video. It's kind of really up to their discretion of whether or not what you did was okay. So kind of sucks, but I've done a few videos where I've chased a boat with the Mavic Mini, and the FAA agent that I spoke to said that that was 100% okay, and she liked the video. And I'd also done another video where I had flown the Mavic Mini from a moving Jeep, and she didn't like that because she said the area was not sparsely populated by her definition. So again, the definition thing is really, there's not a lot to go off of. I guess just use best judgment. I'll link both of those videos in the description so you can see what I mean. According to the FAA agent that I spoke to from Miami, she said boat video good, Jeep video bad. So if you want to try and base flying from a moving vehicle off of that, feel free. Number 5, don't fly over people or property. Now there are some exceptions to this rule as well, like if you're on a movie set and you have permission from the people that you're flying over, but generally you're just gonna wanna not fly over people or property unless you already have these permissions. And if you have that, you probably already have your Part 107, so just don't do it. It's gonna keep you safe legally as well. If your drone loses control and you hit somebody or you damage someone's property, you're gonna be liable for that. There is insurance to cover you for these sort of things, but you really don't wanna deal with it. Also, if your drone falls and causes $500 worth of damage or more, you're legally obligated to report it to the FAA within 10 days. So that's something you don't want to have to do. So yeah, pretty simple. Don't fly over people or property or roads or anything like that. Now, number 4, this one's less obvious, especially if you're a beginner and you never looked at any drone rules before. You can fly no higher than 400 feet. I mean, that really does depend on the airspace that you're in, but if there's no airspace restrictions where you are, you can fly no higher than 400 feet. Now, there's lots of things that would make you be able to fly less than 400 feet. You can never fly higher than 400, with one exception. And I'll do my best to explain this. If you're flying over a building that is, say, 400 feet high, you can fly 400 feet above that building's height. Technically, you'd be 800 feet tall. You still always default to the airspace, so if the airspace says that you can only fly 400 feet, you can't fly above the airspace regulation. And you can check that using apps like AirMap, which I'll link in the description. And there's a bunch of other sectional charts and stuff you can read, but AirMap's the easiest thing to use. Generally, if you're not comfortable with airspaces, I wouldn't recommend using this rule or flying over buildings, which technically you shouldn't be doing anyway. So it's more of a technicality, but you can fly 400 feet above the highest point as long as you're in an uncontrolled airspace. But as a general rule of thumb, if you're just flying the Mini for fun, 400 feet is the highest you can fly. So that kind of brings me into number 3, which is airspace restrictions. It's really important that you try your best to follow these restrictions. Again, I recommend using the app AirMap. It will have little boxes, little grids drawn in, and it will have a number on it. And usually it's going to be 400 feet unless you're close to an airport or a restricted airspace, and then maybe it will say 200 feet. And you can't fly above that 200 feet. So yeah, whatever the box on AirMap says, follow that. Even if, you know, like in the last example I said, there's a building that's 400 feet and you think, oh, I can fly 800 feet because I can fly 400 feet above the top of that building. If you're inside of the box and it says 400, no, just stay at 400. If there's no box, then sure. But AirMap's a really great map, and you can actually request instant approval to fly in zones that are restricted. It's the low altitude authorization and notification capability. That is a long acronym thing that the FAA uses, but you can use AirMap to request permission. And that permission doesn't mean that you can break rules, it just means that you can fly in the area. And you can buy things like insurance with AirMap. So there's 6 different types of airspace. There's A, B, C, D, E, and G. You don't really have to know them. If you use AirMap, it's gonna be pretty safe. It's gonna let you know if you're close to an airport, and it will tell you the altitude that you can fly to. So it may be 400, 200, or it might say you can't fly at all. And when you look on AirMap and there's no little boxes with a height restriction, that's gonna be Class G airspace, and that's what we usually fly in unless you're in a populated area. And Class G is just uncontrolled, and that's pretty much the best case scenario. But you know, it could affect you if you happen to live near an airport or something like that. Doesn't mean you can't fly, you might just be restricted, but if you're close enough to the airport, it may well mean that you can't fly. Number 2, which is another thing I kind of got in trouble for. I'm fixed now, I got my Part 107, but it's making money with your drone. The FAA says that you can't use your drone to make money or further a business without a Part 107 license. So yes, that means that you need your license to do real estate photography, building inspections, take photos for websites, and yes, making YouTube videos with monetization on, which is what I got in trouble for, and had to go get my Part 107 license. Now they're really specific. That means anything to do with furthering a business. So even if you say, hey bud, I'll take some photos for you for your real estate company, and then you just buy me lunch and there's no exchange of money, doesn't matter. The FAA still wants you to have your Part 107 license for that. Will you get in trouble for it if you don't get caught? No, but you could get in trouble for it, and technically that's what you have to do. Number 1, visual line of sight, VLOS. You've probably heard it all the time. I picked this as my number 1 because this is the rule that I violated myself that got me reported by somebody else to the FAA. Probably somebody that viewed my video saw that I flew out of line of sight and reported me, and that's why I got calls from the FAA. If you haven't seen my last video, I talk about it. But yeah, that's what my initial report was to get me in trouble. So what does VLOS, or visual line of sight, actually mean? It means that you actually have to be able to see your drone at all times. You have to be able to physically see it with your eyes. You can't just look in the general direction and see there's nothing around it. You have to actually be able to see the drone. You can use things like a strobe to help extend your visual line of sight to make it easier to see. And you yourself don't have to have visual line of sight to the drone. You can have a visual observer as well. A friend next to you look at the drone. Another kind of workaround you could possibly use for visual line of sight is you can be in radio communication with somebody with visual line of sight. So for example, if you're flying your drone 2 miles in that direction and you don't have visual line of sight of it anymore, but you have a friend in a vehicle following the drone and keeping line of sight with the drone, and he can see it, and he's on the phone to you or talking on a radio to you directly and letting you know that he's got line of sight and there's nothing around it, and you can radio to him and ask him at any point how the drone is doing. The FAA accepts this, and you can do that to kind of work around using visual line of sight. That's the best workaround that I know of, and is accepted by the FAA, so you won't get in trouble for doing that. If you fly with goggles on, which most people probably aren't that are watching this video, but if you do, then you're required to have a visual observer to keep visual line of sight with the drone. If you aren't wearing goggles, you're just flying off of your phone or a screen, you don't have to have a visual observer. If you can glance back and forth between your screen and the drone and make sure you can see it, that's fine in the eyes of the FAA. Okay, so a lot of people are probably asking, why do they make drones that are capable of flying 1, 2, 3, 4 plus miles? Well, there is such a thing as a beyond visual line of sight waiver. It's really difficult to get. The FAA almost never grants it to hobbyists or just normal people. They'll give it out to farmers or power inspection companies that want to fly their drone long distances to inspect their power lines. I believe they give them out to cellular companies too that want to inspect phone lines over long expanses, which sucks. It would be really awesome to be able to get a beyond visual line of sight waiver, but they basically never give them out. All right, I think that'll do it for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Different kind of video again, but I felt that it's important to make something kind of educational to help people not make the same mistakes I did. Definitely let me know in the comments if there's any more questions you guys have. I'm always happy to answer them, and I'm excited to get out and fly. I have to get more creative to make the kind of videos I've been making, because in the past I had violated visual line of sight, which I'm not doing anymore, but you know, there's ways around it. We'll try and keep it as safe as possible, because there are manned aircraft out there and we don't want to jeopardize anybody's safety. There's just a lot of lack of communication and knowledge, I feel, and maybe this will help fill the gap for somebody and save you a call from the Tampa FAA office like I got. Anyway, thanks for watching, and remember, like if you want to and subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll catch you in the next video.